Welcome, I am David Hayes and this is Brickonomics. In a world obsessed with fiat and financial illusions, we focus on what's essential, the bricks economy and real assets. This is the only broadcast digging into the real dynamics reshaping the global economic order. Welcome to the show, and today, the biggest dynamic most people are ignoring isn't a new tech stock or a market forecast. It's a time bomb, ticking down right at the center of the financial system. Forget everything you think you know about a financial crisis. Most people are looking in the wrong place. They're waiting for a stock market crash or another bank failure. But those are just the symptoms. The true epicenter of the next disaster isn't on Wall Street. It's in Washington, London, Tokyo, and Brussels. It is not a corporate crisis. It is a sovereign debt crisis. I've been in this business for decades, and I've learned one non-negotiable truth. History doesn't just rhyme, it repeats with devastating precision, and the pattern is clear. To understand what's coming, you must understand the last 30 years through one simple lens. I call it the ACTS, Principle of Crisis Absorption. It's a game of hot potato, and the hot potato is the toxic loss from each crisis. The entity that absorbs the loss to save the day becomes, by definition, the epicenter of the next crisis. Chapter 1. The Failure of Genius, 1998. Absorbed by the banks. Let's start in 1998 with the hedge fund Long-Term Capital Management, LTCM. Now, these weren't just smart guys. They had Nobel Prize winners on their board. In my early days on the street, we spoke of them with a kind of religious awe. They were the smartest guys in the room. Their strategy, relative value arbitrage, was complex, but the idea was simple. They'd find two almost identical assets, like two government bonds, that had temporarily strayed in price. They'd buy the cheap one, short the expensive one, and wait for the prices to converge, pocketing a tiny, risk-free profit. The problem? To make real money from pennies, you need leverage, and they used massive leverage. For every $1 of their own, they were borrowing $50, $60, even $100. When Russia defaulted on its debt that year, all their risk-free models broke. Their trades didn't converge, they diverged violently. The fund was instantly insolvent, and because they were so leveraged, they owed money to every single major bank. I remember the panic. This wasn't a stock market story, this was a financial plumbing story. The fall of LTCM threatened to pull the entire global system down. So, who stepped in? The Fed didn't print. They didn't cut rates. They played Godfather. Alan Greenspan got the heads of all the major Wall Street banks in a room and forced them to jointly bail out and absorb the losses of LTCM. The banks had saved the day. The hot potato was passed for the first time from a hedge fund, rightarrow the banks. Or Chapter 2, the banking epicenter, 2008, absorbed by the taxpayer. Exactly 10 years later, the banks, the very entities that had absorbed the 1998 shock, were now the epicenter. And here's a crucial point, that 1998 bailout taught them a fatal lesson. It taught them they were too big to fail. That arrogance defined the next decade. Most people think the 2008 crisis was about bad subprime mortgages. Again, that was just the kindling. The real fire, the mechanism that almost ended the world, was the repo market. The pawnshop analogy is the best one. It's the oil in the engine of the global financial system, where banks borrow from each other overnight to stay liquid. The problem? The collateral, the gold watch they were pawning, was those toxic mortgage-backed securities, MBS. When the market realized these assets were worthless trash, the pawnshops slammed shut. No one would accept anyone's collateral. I remember that morning vividly. The terror wasn't the stock market ticker. The terror was that banks had stopped lending to each other. The system was 24, maybe 48 hours away from ATMs simply not dispensing cash. And who absorbed this earthquake? The taxpayer. The government stepped in, but they couldn't force another entity to eat the loss. The loss was too big, so they invented a new tool, quantitative easing, QE. It's a fancy term for printing trillions of dollars to buy the bank's toxic trash assets and move them onto the public balance sheet. You, the taxpayer, absorbed that loss, not as a direct bill, but as the first seed of the inflation and asset bubbles we see today. The hot potato was passed a second time, from the bank's right arrow, the taxpayer, via government debt. Chapter 3, The Cover-Up Collapse, 2020, absorbed by the government. This is the most critical chapter, the one everyone gets wrong. The economic crisis of 2020 did not begin in March 2020. I want you to burn this date into your memory. September 2019. I was watching my terminal as it happened. The repo market, the exact same plumbing that broke in 2008, exploded. Interest rates for overnight cash spiked from 2% to 10%. It was breaking right there in plain sight. Why? Because the government, after absorbing the 2008 burden, had issued so much debt to fund its spending that it had literally sucked all the available cash, liquidity, out of the system. There wasn't enough cash left for the banks to pawn their assets. It was like seeing the same crack in the dam, only 10 times wider. The Fed knew the game was up and began emergency, not QE, repo operations immediately. Then, the global health crisis hit. In my view, this was the perfect, immaculate cover story. It provided the political air cover for what they had to do anyway, unleash the largest bailout in history. The epicenter this time should have been the taxpayer EU, facing a devastating deflationary spiral. But the government couldn't let that happen. Think about the sheer political genius of their move. They rescued you, the taxpayer, by handing you a $1,200 check. That check was a distraction. It made you feel included in the bailout while they were mainlining trillions of dollars into the financial system to plug the repo market hole and keep the corporations solvent. And who absorbed all of it? The stimulus checks, the PPP loans, the corporate bailouts, the government. They took all that new debt, trillions and trillions of it, directly onto their own balance sheet. The hot potato was passed for the final time, from the taxpayer right arrow, the government. Jersia's final chapter, the sovereign debt epicenter, the endgame. And now we are here. The game of musical chairs is over. The government is the last one standing, and they are holding the potato. It is burning their hands. They are trapped in what I call the sovereign debt doom loop. Think about it. 1. They must borrow money just to pay the interest on their old debts. 2. To borrow that much, they desperately need low interest rates. 3. But to fight the massive inflation they created with the 2020 bailout, the Fed is forced to hike interest rates. This is checkmate. I've watched smaller countries get into this exact position, Argentina, Turkey, Lebanon, but I've never seen it happen to the world's reserve currency. They can't default, they can't stop spending, they can't raise taxes enough. There is only one emergency exit left. It's the only move on the board, when the government cannot borrow from the market. The Fed, the central bank, will be forced to step in. They won't call it a bailout. They'll have a new name for it. Quantitative easing, yield curve control, it doesn't matter. It means the Fed will print money to buy the government's debt directly. This is no longer a forecast, it is an inevitability. It's the government bailing itself out by destroying its own currency. The consequence is not a sudden crash. It is a slow, brutal, and deliberate erosion of your purchasing power. This is inflation, not as an accident, but as a policy. This is why in this new era, cash is not king. Cash is a melting ice cube. This is why working hard is no longer enough. And that is why you watch Brickonomics. We don't chase illusions. We analyze the bricks economy. But that's my analysis. What about you? What is your personal opinion? Do you see a different endgame? Do you see a different endgame, or are we locked into this path? Let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.